Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Antigua's Prime Minister praised by Commonwealth Secretary General for work on creating Global Multidimensional Vulnerability Index. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 10th July 2023. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland has praised Prime Minister Gaston Browne for being in the forefront of efforts to create a global multidimensional vulnerability index. Prime Minister Browne co-chairs the United Nations high-level panel on the issue with Norway's former Prime Minister Erna Solberg. ABS's Garfield Burford reports.
It's a huge privilege and pleasure to be with all the leaders as they celebrated the 50th anniversary of CARICOM in Chaguaramas.
Baroness Scotland reacting to her engagement with CARICOM heads of government during the 45th regular meeting in Trinidad and Tobago this week. Key issues were discussed, among them climate change, which poses an existential threat to all countries, but particularly small island developing states such as Antigua and Barbuda. The Secretary-General of the 56-member Commonwealth commends Prime Minister Honourable Gaston Browne on his co-chairing of a United Nations high-level panel seeking to develop a multidimensional vulnerability index. This will be a fairer way to assess the extent to which countries are eligible for concessional financing.
The multidimensional index is our attempt to understand that this is not just about fiscal rectitude. It's about the exogenous shocks that we face and over which we have no control.
As it is now, the criterion used is gross national income per capita, which is often seen as a warped way of assessing a country's situation because all this can be wiped out in an instant during a natural disaster. That's why Baroness Scotland says the work of the Prime Minister and his co-chair, Norway's former Prime Minister Erna Solberg, is so crucial.
The world cannot continue to simply look at GDP. It has to be GDP plus. And I think it is extraordinarily important that the Prime Minister of Antigua, on behalf of all of us, led that initiative. I'm also very supportive of what our Commonwealth countries are doing.
Baroness Scotland also notes the connection between climate disasters and a country's fiscal situation.
In 2016, when I became Secretary General, we were still fighting that issue. And we were saying it's ridiculous. Everybody knows that there is a direct correlation between debt and climate disasters. But it wasn't accepted until now. We have the empirical data which shows that direct correlation.
Antigua and Barbuda is also making strides in the area of climate justice. The Twin Island state joined the Pacific nation of Tuvalu in co-founding the Commission of Small Island States on Climate Change and International Law, COSIS. Baroness Scotland is also proud of the efforts on tackling this issue as developing countries face a bigger burden from climate change than the developed world, which contributed most to the problem.
The fact that Antigua, the country of my father's birth, so I'm claiming I'm part Antigua, and my father was born in St. John. We have to get up and fight. And I'm very proud that our country is putting the shoulder to the wheel with all the other 55 countries and saying we will not stand by silent, that we will raise our voices and we will be the difference that we need to be in order to change the inherent unfairness we currently face.
In a bold move, CARICOM heads have backed full free movement of all categories of people in the community. The announcement was made at the closing press conference of the 45th Regular Conference of the CARICOM Heads of Government in Trinidad and Tobago on Wednesday, 5th July 2023. Zane Romulus of the DBS News World has more.
By early 2024, nationals of most member states of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, should be able to travel and live freely across the region, with the bloc's heads of government now backing the full free movement of people. Dominica's Prime Minister and Chairman of CARICOM, Roosevelt Skerritt, addressed the issue during his closing speech at the 45th Summit in Trinidad and Tobago, marking the 50th anniversary of the Caribbean Community.
We certainly have to enhance functional cooperation among our nations. These are the things which matter to the average person on the streets in the Caribbean community, that they can see tangible benefits in all of these fancy decisions and all of these documents. But how do we make life better for people? And we spoke about hassle-free travel. When you get to a point, you don't have to be harassed. We have to feel, the ease of moving from one country to the other within the Caribbean community.
Under the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME, which falls under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, CARICOM nationals are allowed to freely move in participating countries to engage in gainful economic activity. Barbadian Prime Minister Mia Mottley clarified that this step now removes the existing stipulation that the people who seek to move across the region to live and work must belong to certain categories of skilled personnel. Motley also pointed out that the Treaty of Chaguaramas will be amended to guarantee access to primary and emergency healthcare services, as well as children's primary and secondary education, and thus improve the conditions of Caribbean citizens when they move around the region.
That is why Prime Minister Skerritt said that the heads who founded this entity would be smiling on us, because in a very real sense, this is what ordinary people want. And I want to say something. In a region that is underpopulated, and in a region that is facing the most difficult crises, from climate to recovery from pandemic to debt to all kinds of other problems, if ever there was a time that we need to come together as one, it is now.
There are some limitations, however. The first is these new free movement provisions will still not apply to the Bahamas and Montserrat, and the status quo of some countries imposing visa restrictions on Haitian nationals will remain. Legal experts have been commissioned to prepare a report on this issue by March 30th, 2024, to adopt a definitive position. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. As the United States Secretary of State, the U.S. Democratic leader in Congress, and Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister continued their discussions about issues of energy security, Trinidad and Tobago continues to seek a further easing of sanctions on Venezuela with regard to the Dragon gas deal. So at what point will there be a further easing of those sanctions in this regard? It is a question TV6's political editor Joel Brown posed to the U.S. Congress Democratic leader during a media briefing on Thursday last.
On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and their delegations held a bilateral meeting on matters of interest between the U.S. and Trinidad and Tobago before Secretary Blinken flew to Guyana to meet with Guyana's President Dr. Irfan Ali. Prime Minister Rowley also met with a bipartisan congressional delegation led by the Democratic leader in the U.S. House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries. During a media conference hosted by Prime Minister Rowley, Mr. Jeffries said the issue of energy security was discussed. TV6 users sought further details since CARICOM has been calling for the removal of U.S. sanctions on Venezuela with respect to the Petro-Caribbean initiative and for further progress on the 2-year provisional license granted by the U.S. to Trinidad and Tobago for the further pursuit of its deal for the supply of natural gas from Venezuela's Dragon field.
I'm wondering at what point could the region and Trinidad and Tobago in particular see any further movement with regard to the issue of easing or further easing of sanctions on Venezuela?
Very important question. We've heard the concerns that have been raised very clearly by the Prime Minister and other leaders over the last day or so. And we want to try to find a path forward, a way that makes sense in a complicated geopolitical environment. And certainly I think that will be one of our takeaways as we return back to the country, to the United States.
Mr. Jeffries, Then gave way to a member of his delegation, the top Democrat on the U.S. Congress Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks, who said Prime Minister Rowley raised the matter during recent visits to the U.S. and during CARICOM's meeting with Secretary Blinken on Wednesday in Port of Spain.
And so there's dialogue that is going on and will continue to go on. And as he has told all of us, it has to happen soon because the pressure is on with reference to continue to compete. And that is the purpose of us being here. We were told that, do you see us? Do you hear us? Do you feel us? And I think that message, we see, we hear, and we feel. And we'll go back, as the leader said, to work to make a difference.
During the CARICOM conference in Port of Spain, St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, said U.S. policy on Venezuela is a result of American domestic politics. Dr. Gonsalves also said the struggle in the world is not between autocracies and democracies, but about the control of resources. Mr. Jeffries said he did not hear the comment, but gave a general response.
Autocracy has been on the rise all across the world. And so that remains an authentic, legitimate concern of the United States of America, and I think an authentic, legitimate concern for the free world. One of the things that we do value about our relationship with Trinidad and Tobago is that we have this shared democratic values, a shared system of freedom and liberty.
Jewel Brown, TV6 News.
The People's Republic of China, meantime, is calling on more countries in the Caribbean to join the existing countries who support the One China policy, in which Taiwan is not recognized as an independent state. The call was made as China paid tribute to CARICOM in its 50th anniversary and has promised additional funding for disaster prevention and relief in the region this year. But the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines says his country recognizes one Chinese civilization that can have two different political expressions. Jewel Brown again reports.
International partners of CARICOM have paid tribute to the regional body during its 50th anniversary celebrations at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Port of Spain. On day 2 of CARICOM's 45th regular meeting, China's Assistant Foreign Minister said that over the past 5 decades, CARICOM has achieved remarkable progress on the 4 pillars of regional integration, human and social development, foreign policy coordination, and security cooperation.
China supports Caribbean countries in upholding independence and appreciates the commitment of friendly Caribbean countries to the One China principle. We welcome more Caribbean countries to join the big family and usher in and benefit from a brighter future of China-Caribbean relations. And we are also ready to continue assisting Caribbean countries in economic and social development to the best of our ability.
Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, Suriname, Montserrat, Guyana, Barbados, the Bahamas, Grenada, and Dominica support the One China principle or policy in which the People's Republic of China does not recognize a separate entity called the Republic of China, which administers Taiwan.
On the top of the $2 million of contribution to China-Caribbean Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Fund last year, China will provide additional $1 million this year for disaster prevention and relief. And we balance the special circumstances and concerns of small island developing countries and is ready to work with them to address financing difficulties, accelerate energy and climate transition, and achieve green and sustainable development.
Belize, Haiti, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and St. Kitts and Nevis are CARICOM member states that maintain relations with Taiwan. TV6 News posed a question about the matter to St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves while he spoke with the media during the CARICOM conference.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines supports a one Chinese civilization policy. There's one Chinese civilization. There's one European civilization. Is there only one state in Europe?
Dr. Gonsalves said a civilization can have different states.
St. Vincent and Grenadines has diplomatic relations with the Republic of China and Taiwan. We don't say anything bad about the People's Republic of China. As far as we are concerned, the dispute issues they have, It's a dispute between two political expressions of the Chinese civilization. And all I'm interested in is peace across the Taiwan Straits.
Prime Minister Gonzalez said St. Vincent and the Grenadines works very well with China at the UN, in the Caribbean Development Bank, and in the World Health Organization. When China's President Xi Jinping visited Trinidad and Tobago in 2013, it was announced that only the Caribbean states that support the People's Republic of China's One China policy would have benefited from US $3 billion in concessional loans.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines does not have, in its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a for sale sign, metaphorically. I just outlined we support a One China civilization.
Jewel Brown, TV6 News.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.